Okay, look, we can all agree Fortnite is not going anywhere anytime soon, and this isn't more obvious after what happened last chapter during Chapter 5 Season 3. This is by far the worst season to ever come to the game, and if we look back at all the worst seasons, it's obvious why we can all agree that this was the worst season of all time. Hi, I'm FazeGoat. In today's video, we're going to break down all of the worst seasons from every Fortnite chapter and talk about what the community hated so much about each and every one of them. At the end of this video, I will rank them based on my opinion, but that doesn't really matter of how good or bad they were. Before we get into the video, I just want to say I don't have like any footage for most of these seasons, and I couldn't grab any chapter trailers or nothing, so you'll mostly be just seeing Chapter 2 remix footage in the back, so if it looks really weird and choppy, that's why. Thank you for your understanding. To start off, we're going to start here at Chapter 1, Season 7. And in fact, for Chapter 1, I'll be doing both Season 7 and X, as they're very similar in why the community hated both of them. Now, to start off, one reason people really didn't like Season 7 was for one main thing, and that was the Infinity Blade and the planes. These were both super overpowered. The planes were extremely hard to stop and bring down at the time before the nerf, and the Infinity Blade, giving you 400 HP and pretty much the ability to one-shot anybody, was not a very good look. And even though it was really hard to get a hold of at the time, it still just wasn't very good and didn't make a very good gameplay mechanic at the time. It ruined build fights, and if you look at a couple like tournaments from the time, it really just wrecked everything. But the big problem was with Chapter 1 Season X, where, oh boy, the mechs were just a big problem. And not only that, they did remove the pump shotgun for the combat shotgun, which isn't super important for today's video, but that's a topic for another time. But these mechs were extremely hard to kill. They had a ton of HP. They were just really tanky, vehicles. It's like the cars from Chapter 5, Season 3. These things had weapons on them, they could jump, they had great mobility, and they had a lot of health. And more importantly, trying to shoot people out of these things, they had a protective shield. Then you could shoot them. And another thing was in solos, teaming was super bad back then, with two people climbing into these mechs as they were two-seaters, one person to control the gun and one person to control the feet and the movement. It was just, oh my god, this game was at an unplayable state at the time. It was super hard, and both these seasons were not really fun with these OP items when they were out. Of course, Fortnite tried to fix the mech problem by nerfing them, but they ended up increasing the spawn rates, which made it even worse. And you couldn't go at least one game without finding two guys teaming in a mech. And at the end, it was just a wreck. Now, both Chapter 1, Season 7, and X were brought down by the same thing. This was an overpowered either mechanic or item or something that the player used in a way to help them and give them an advantage in any fight. And overpowered items have really been, frowned upon by the community at the time or God, ever, because it's not fair that a pro player can get dominated by somebody who just, gets lucky with an overpowered item. That's not fair at all to the pros or anyone in the player base. It's just it makes fights unfun, it makes fights unfair, and a lot of times you're just gonna be losing over something that you really can't control. Now, with that, I would like to bring attention to two things. First of all, I am very sorry for these terrible, terrible icons that I found for the chapters. That's on me. I should have looked a little harder for, some better quality pictures. But I have a lot to say about Chapter 2, Season 6, the Primal season, and it's not all bad. The season was really fun, honestly. The big problem was it got boring really fast, and the mechanics were really like they were innovative, but they were really, really bad. And to kick us off, let's start off with what the mechanics were. And in this season, they wanted to change the way weapons were handled, and they wanted to give away with the upgrade benches. Which, if you remember from Chapter 2, you could upgrade your weapons using like 200 wood or something, which was a really neat idea. That I mean, hey, your weapon, you have extra materials on hand, you can upgrade your gun so it does more damage, helping you win more fights. Even though you're losing these materials, you're getting something that's even better in return, either a harder hitting weapon or in any other case, much more a harder hitting weapon most times. And another thing was during this season, they wanted to change it to just crafting. You could craft materials or different weapons. So you could take, like I said, they had makeshift weapons this season, which were like literally just regular guns, but kind of haphazardly put together. Now, people did actually enjoy using guns like the makeshift shotgun, as it was Worse than the pump, definitely, but it had a faster pullout time. And if you were good with it and it had a small reticle, you could hit really big shots. Problem was though, is it only came in up to blue rarity, so it really wasn't that strong. And more importantly, a lot of times you were much better off if you found a blue one, just upgrading to a purple pump shotgun to have that more damage and that 2 extra mag space. And to upgrade, of course, during the season, you had to either find animal bones, which for the primal path, or mechanical parts for like the basic weapon path. And a lot of times the mechanic or the primal weapons were super bad, and the mechanical ones just outdid class them in every way. I mean, it was just not even funny how much better most mechanic weapons were to the primal ones at the time. And the only exception to this would be the shotgun, which at the time was absolutely broken due to how much damage it could deal. And it was a two-shot shotgun because every primal weapon had like a special take on it at the time. And it was just super innovative, but it was handled in a very weird and poor manner that I really think brought down the season. I'm not saying I don't like this, of course, I don't like this chapter or nothing or the season, but it was just not handled very well. And after a while, the mechanics got extremely boring. It was doing the same thing over and over again. Hope to God you find a purple or my fault, a blue mechanic or makeshift shotgun on the ground and upgrade it to a purple pump. That was what you did pretty much every game, or you would stick it out with the purple or the blue makeshift shotgun. I never liked using the primal weapons. They felt kind of cheap to use a lot of times. And the shotgun was just super. I don't know. I was never a big fan of the shotgun, but it was super strong on controller for people who did play on controller back then because you had that aim assist, you had the buffed aim assist from chapter 2, and just I don't know, every gun felt way stronger. But one big downside to a lot of primal guns, like say the AR for example, was it had zero first shot accuracy, which was super important in a lot of fights. Because if you look at pro players now, they will use like say Meowskull's pew pew rifle in the chapter 2 remix to start fights by hitting like 66 or 123 damage headshots so they can start this fight in a good look. The problem was at the time, you know, these guns never had first shot accuracy, and they were never given this, by the way. They still don't have first shot accuracy. And even though they did a lot more damage than the mechanical ones, that first shot accuracy and being able to start fights with a much stronger beginning didn't make up for the fact that they sure hit harder. Because you really need to be able to shoot from long range, especially in this season where there was bows that could shoot stupid distances and they had flame effects, stink effects, explosive effects. You had to have a weapon that could shoot distance to counter these bows or carry one yourself because if you didn't, you were going to get outclassed, 90% of the time in the start of a fight. And God, there's been fights that I remember being in where I was just one tapped by a bow and I saw the dude, but I couldn't shoot him because I had a primal rifle and it was just throwing darts at this point in time if I would hit him or not. And for example, a blue pump shotgun at the time compared to a primal at the time, it was really bad. The blue primal, remember this was a 2 round burst shotgun at max did a did 60. It did 60 max. But it had that 2 shots, and a lot of times if you hit one hard, you're gonna hit the second one hard. It wasn't like the 2 shot shotgun where the shots were really delayed. This was like boom, boom, like it was instant afterwards. And say a blue pump at max can deal 175. So you're pulling the trigger the same amount of times for a gun. The only difference is how much, ammo you actually end up using. Which, if you really have a big problem with wasting a ton of ammo, then yeah, I wouldn't go for the primal path. But it was objectively the better path during this season. Like it was just objectively that much better for just the shotgun. Other than that, though, running the mechanical bow and the mechanical AR, it was all way, way better than just the mechanical, or my bad, the primal anything. And especially like the pistol and shotgun, these were some of my shotgun, SMG, these were some of the worst guns ever because they didn't have first shot accuracy. And even though SMGs are used up close, a lot of times you would miss up close with these submachine guns, and it just, yeah, I mean, they were a fun addition, but I would never want to see them return. And more importantly, just maybe make them a little stronger. Give them, I mean, I get the first shot accuracy not existing, but these reticles were like walking with a mechanical AR. It was not fair, just how bad the bloom was. And even shooting once, your bloom would go outrageously big, making just, God, it was just such a bad season overall. And I mean, I don't know what else to say. None of the guns had first shot accuracy, and like I said, if you really wanted to compete at long ranges, you needed a bow or a sniper, which I don't even think we're in during this season. Now, the only thing I want to say to cap off Chapter 2, Season 6 was even though the mechanics were innovative, a lot of times either players didn't want to use them or they were underpowered or the existing mechanics or weapons were just way better than, the new ones. And this will lead me into the next chapter, Chapter 3, Season 4, the Chrome slash Paradise season. This season was not fun. I'm sorry. There was not a lot of new guns added this season. And at one point, the Chrome felt so just useful at times, or my bad, useless at times. I never really got into a game where the Chrome was actually good, like that often. I never used it, like only for rotates. And even then, there were so many rotates this season that it really wouldn't matter what you used to rotate with. But Chrome was not worth wasting an entire slot for to grab Chrome splashes, which was how you mainly had it outside the Chrome areas. And even then, I don't even think that like phasing through walls and stuff is very important. If you're playing like maybe low elo games, yeah, that would make total sense. But once you start playing actually, I don't know, half decent players, they're not gonna let you just walk through their wall to hit a max damage pump in the back of the head. That wasn't gonna happen. That was never gonna happen. Not during this season as the competitive scene was starting to get on a massive rise. But besides that point, there was not enough new features this season to really keep me engaged. I remember quitting about halfway through the season as I really did not enjoy it. It was just like the weapons felt kind of bad, I guess you could say. The two new additions being the Everchrome shotgun and Everchrome AR both had really cool ideas, and that was the fact that first of all, the Everchrome rifle was a 5 round burst assault rifle, and the more damage you dealt with it, you could evolve it, eventually going from gray to mythic. Um, Big problem. This just made the usage of these guns like skyrocket. And that's I really feel like the only reason these guns were used was because of that. And the Everchrome shotgun was a good gun, don't get me wrong, but one big problem with it was the fact that it was just not the best shotgun in the game at the time. It was a better one. I don't exactly remember which one it was. I think it was either the striker pump or lever action. It was one of those two. And it would just outclass this gun. And this gun shot in some weird straight line. So the reticle was literally just a line. It was not very good to use. And then the whole evolving thing, 9 times out of 10, you would never get far enough to evolve your gun. Like I never remembered actually getting a mythic Everchrome shotgun. It never happened. And in my opinion, this was just a lazy excuse, for a season, which as mean as it sounds, the Chrome didn't give me anything that useful besides a rotate. But when there was Rift to goes, Rifts, and Tornadoes this season, you didn't need even more rotations. It just kind of clogged up the loot pool as something else. The additions this season were not very good, and let alone the map changes were just they were god awful. And the Chrome, I won't say it looked bad, but it was really annoying to look at after long periods of time, as you would just be looking at it for forever and just yeah, this is starting to really get on my nerves to look at. It was just a really ugly season, and the weapons, the loophole, it was not all there. It really just was not all there. And they could have done so much more with the Chrome. It could have been so good. The Everchrome shotgun and AR could have been super strong. But the problem was that the Everchrome shotgun was definitely outclassed, and the Everchrome AR was broken on release. To be honest with you, Chapter 3, Season 4 was really not that fun, and mechanics were pretty average. The weapons were super average, and people just overall did not like the season due to the lack of, anything that was added. But this will bring me to one of my favorite seasons of all time. Don't know why this is hated so much. Chapter 4, Season 3, Wild. I don't understand why this chapter was so hated. To me, I think it was really the lack of changes in the loot pool, only adding a few guns and taking like one away. Not a lot of balance changes and just very little additions and removals. But that doesn't mean a season is bad, and by any means, I think the biggest hate for the season was really just the map changes. The map changes were not very good, I'll say that much. Um, because one of the big things this season were vehicles. You could, they were very versatile during this season, and you could find a lot of really fast moving vehicles anywhere. until they added the jungle, which wiped out a decent amount of the middle of the map, which wasn't even that bad. I mean, yes, the jungle was a really I really did not like the jungle, to be honest with you guys. It was super annoying just to look at and try to traverse. If you didn't know where you were going, you were gonna get lost 9 out of 10 times. And the weapon changes or weapon loop pool changes were very minimal. There was only two that I can think of, and that was the addition of the gloves, the invisibility gauntlets, which were not very good, as you know. They've never been good. Invisibility items have never been good in Fortnite. I'm just gonna say that now. But one thing they did add was Relix's MK, not Relix's, I'm sorry, the MK Alpha, which is like the MK7 with a slower fire rate and easier recoil. So the recoil was way easier to control, but with the downside of a slower fire rate and less DPS than the MK7. But they did have a mythic variant this season, which was super strong. And the replacement for this replaced the red eye, I think it was called. It was like a red eye marksman rifle. It had the same premise, but instead it was a single fire shot marksman rifle that was really, really good if you could, you knew how to use it correctly. But if not, then you were really out of luck. And the aim required for that gun was a lot. Like you needed a really good aim for this gun, but just the changes this season were very minuscule to the loot pool. A lot of guns were not like changed, nerfed, or buffed. I There was no new shotgun this season. Just really an AR, in my opinion. That was the big focus. Was just the MK Alpha was a good AR. Don't get me wrong. I won't ever say anything bad about it, but it wasn't enough to carry this whole season. And one thing that made the season so good was the actual changes in this jungle area. They added these, we can call them vaults, I guess you can call them, but they're more of like chambers, like little trials and chambers to get something. Now, to do this, you had to light some flames. I don't remember if you had to light all the flames or a certain amount. Um, or my fault, from up top to bottom, you had to look at the flames down at the bottom after you gave this little volt a purple item, which with keys and augments at the time was not very hard to get a hold of. And shockwaves, of course, would count. The purple gloves that were everywhere counted, so you could easily get into these volts, but you had to check the flames on the bottom, light the ones on top, and then the next part of the vault would open, where you had a 50-50 chance. One side you either get rifted out, which was super good for rotates, or the other side you opened up the vault. Now the vault usually had, I think, a rare chest or two in it, and a ton of ammo. So every single time you open this, you had not only did you have good weapons, but you had an immediate way out. So you can immediately go get the guns, block yourself in, someone pushes, immediately rift out, and you're good. So you never had to fight anybody. And with the jungle theme, you could get a lot of distance, with these rifts over the trees, so you would never have to deal with them. So overall, Chapter 4, Season 3 was one of the most overhated seasons because it just really didn't add much, but that's fine. A lot of times you don't need to add a lot to make a season good. I mean, what made chapter 1 so good? They didn't change a lot of the guns around or the weapons around or nerf or buff a lot of things. They added new weapons to the loot pool and rarely took away guns, which didn't make these seasons bad. These are some of the best seasons in Fortnite history. But all of a sudden adding a very little weapons to an already decent season was a bad thing. So why was that? No, I have no reason. I have no clue why was that. But I will say the POIs were very forgettable, and the weapons were fine, and the theming was really just not that good. So to sum up, what made Chapter 4 Season 3 Wild so bad was just the fact that people really didn't like the changes to the loot pool. Mainly it was the fact that there was almost zero, which is fine. You don't always have to have big changes to a loot pool to make a season great. I mean, think of like Chapter 1 Season 3 or 4 or 5 or any Chapter 1 seasons. They didn't add a lot to the loot pool like they did over time, but they didn't make drastic change to the loot pool like ever, which is fine. If a season's already good, don't add a ton of things and ruin that season. But with that, I would just like to say, before we go to Chapter 5, Season 3, I would like to ask all y'all to like and subscribe. Remember, it's free, and if you watch it to this point in time, you must have enjoyed it at least a little bit. Like I said, it's free and doesn't hurt if you join. Plus, if you don't like my content, you can always unsub later without any cost to you. That's all. Thank you. Alright, here we go. Chapter 5, Season 3, Wrecked. And to put it bluntly, yeah, it was definitely a train wreck. And now, unlike Chapter 4, Season 3, that didn't add a lot of mechanics, this season brought a ton of mechanics. But you know what they say? A small amount of mechanics is better than a ton of really bad mechanics. I'm sorry, a small amount of good mechanics is way better than a ton of bad mechanics, which is what Chapter 5 Season 3 added. And these big problems were things like Nitro, what they did to the cars, the buffing, the lack of nerfs was what really brought them down. And I'm going to break down almost every single addition to this chapter and why it brought the overall chapter down. And we'll start with Nitro. Now, Nitro had two main uses. Number one, it made you faster and gave you the ability to run right through walls. This was overpowered, especially in build mode, where you could run right at someone's wall, run straight through it, and hit them with a max gatekeeper shot, and then follow it up with a second max gatekeeper shot. There was no counterplay to this, as they would even go through your stairs in most cases. And a lot of times they wouldn't just destroy one build, it destroyed like an area of builds, so it would just wipe out almost anything. Not to mention that Nitro was used in cars to make them have infinite fuel. Infinite, well, not infinite, but a ton more boost, and it made these cars faster. These cars had a lot of problems, and this was just one of many of these problems. Now, not to mention that the cars were overpowered as, oh my god, they were terrible. Now, Fortnite decided, you know what, we've had cars in for a while, so let's give them some new mechanics. They decided to make these cars moddable, kind of like the weapons during this chapter. But the problem was every single mod besides one was overpowered. Besides two, I'm sorry, and that was the two unoverpowered items. Mods were both tire mods. There was off-road tires, which was better than bulletproof tires unless you were getting shot at. You know what I'm saying? Another thing is, a lot of times you could find these white boxes around the map that you could run right into, and your vehicle would immediately heal back to max. So, say someone can hit your vehicle for 2,000 out of its 2,100 damage. You hit this white box, oh, you're back to full. No problems, no stops necessary. You can just continue going, which didn't make these cars very fair to catch up to. And plus, with Nitro, you could no joke hit one of these boxes and travel 1,000 meters in like 30 seconds with the Nitro rings on the map, which was another really big addition. And in doing so, if you hit a Nitro ring, they would also give you Nitro. Like I said, Nitro was already just not one of my favorite things just out of the game. It destroyed almost, anything. Now, the cow catcher really wasn't that overpowered. It was just not a really big new addition. You could mod cars with the off-road tires and the bulletproof tires, not bulletproof tires, but the cow catchers before this. And these were both, I mean, not really overpowered. They were not in a ton of seasons, so people didn't, use them. They were never a big thing, of course. But during this season, they added more. They added one new bumper and two mounted weapons. Yes, kind of like if you remember back in chapter 1 season X, the mounted turrets on these mechs. This is what really brought down the season. Is not only did this feel exactly like mechs again, but this time they were everywhere and they were even stronger. They added two weapons, and that was of course the machine gun and the grenade launcher. The grenade launcher was way stronger at taking out builds, which is one thing that made build mode almost impossible to play a season, was grenade launchers and another item that I'll mention later. But this thing did decent damage to players, if hit, and if it even if it wasn't hit, it was still gonna hit you for a ton of damage, or your builds would just be completely disintegrated. And then if you were caught out in the open in a game of zero builds with a dude with a machine gun car, this thing did so much damage so fast that it was beyond saving most times. You would get hit and you would know you got hit. Like you would pretty much be dead immediately. Now, of course, these were just really bad. But another thing was with Nitro, they added the spiked bumper, which gave you increased damage to your ramming ability, not like in the vehicle, not like buildings or mats, but into players. And if you hit someone with Nitro already with the season with a car with Nitro, you would hit them and they would go completely flying. So they take fall damage on top of that, plus the spike bumper hitting for like 40 or 50 at the time. It was really not fun. And like I said, build mode was almost impossible to play this chapter for a lot of it, especially ranked, which is what I mainly like to play because of how rampant the cars were. And this does include how bad the nitro fists are, which I will get into now. these Nitro Fists were was the worst item ever added to Fortnite. This is worse than, I would say, a lot of things like OG boogie, worse than OG boogie bombs, worse than on release heavy sniper, worse than drum gun. This thing could go through builds. You could infinitely punch with it. And the fact that it had four charges to uppercut through your builds or punch straight through them, that was not fair. You could not do anything with builds this season, as it just ripped builds apart all season long. And not only that, they didn't add really that much that was new to the season. And that's because they were working with these modded weapons. Now, at the start of Chapter 5, they added a ton of new guns, the Striker AR, the Hammer Pump Assault Rifle, new SMGs. They added everything that was new. But as the seasons went on, they decided, well, what if we bring back OG guns and let them mod them? Which is all we got this season, was just three, moddable versions of weapons, which was the combat shotgun, the hand cannon, and of course the combat AR. Now I'm forgetting one weapon in the inclusions to being added this season, and this was the boom bolt, the only, in my opinion, real new weapon added this season. But like, this thing, if you would guess it, it destroyed builds. And not only that, the only other gun that was added was halfway through the season with the heavy impact sniper. All it did was hit builds extremely hard, and it hit players decently hard too, but the bullet drop was extremely bad. And just like three overpowered weapons, which doesn't include the boom bow, which would stick to players. And if you remember the last time we had a quote unquote sticky grenade launcher, this thing was being double pumped. And it was not easy to stop this thing. The boom bolt was way easier, but the big problem was if it hits you, it was guaranteed to hit you. And this thing could shoot very far. It was the sniper of the season, as I would like to call it. And these three items, the cars slash nitro, the nitro fist, and the boom bolt, made this season almost unplayable, and especially for builds players. I love to go back to builds because this was my main way of playing the game at the time. And until they nerfed or unadded cars from ranked, it was impossible to play. Like, I'm being serious when I say I would get into fights all the time just to be shot down by the machine gun or hit with a grenade launcher or ran right through with a car, and you just couldn't stop it. Like, you genuinely couldn't stop it. And not only that, dude, this season was so ugly. I'm sorry. I like the wasteland, like from Fallout, for example, because it looks like, hey, there was life here. There was nothing but sand. It was so ugly, and everything was like gray and orange and black themed, and it was just a nasty looking season. And in my opinion, Nitro was a bad mechanic. Like, it was good, but it was really bad. And if it didn't go through builds like it did, I would still like to have Nitro as a thing because it made, so you couldn't find shocks, or you couldn't find the fist, or you couldn't find a car because of rank. This gave players the ability to just sprint jump all in a zone way faster than using most, mobility items at the time. It was a really strong way of just using movement, but the fact they gave it the ability to not only ram into builds, but to people to knock them back, which did a lot of damage on its own, it made Nitro unplayable. And like I said, the season was super ugly. The mechanics were not very fun. And during the season, Fortnite realized, look, we can't end the season early because we're not done with the next season, which was going to be the Marvel season. They instead decided to make Reload. In my opinion, this mode saved Fortnite in the long term, as Reload gave players, at the time, in my opinion, an actual game mode to play. If you didn't really want to play against the cars in a game of Publix and you didn't want to sweat and ranked, Reload was always there. And Reload was a very fun game mode, and I really enjoyed playing it with friends. Of course, with the addition of solos this season, I can now play it by myself, which isn't as fun as playing with friends, of course. But this really saved Fortnite. Like in the short term, this was able to save Fortnite during the season, as they had no clue what to do to fix this, as there was really no way to fix it. And the whole point eventually had to be, look, we have to just weather this storm. So they eventually just had, like, they had to suck it up and just wait for this horrendous season to finish, and they couldn't do anything about it. as like I said, Chapter 5 Season 3 wrecked was it was not fun. And a lot of, like the mythics that they did add the season of bosses were legitimately just guns, old guns like the combat AR or the combat shotgun or the mythic hand cannon variant or the boom bolt. And the big problem was a lot of times I didn't really like a lot of these attachments that were put on these guns. And since they were mythic, you couldn't change them, which was a big problem with Cerberus's Gatekeeper shotgun. Even though it was super strong, the attachments it had on it were not very good or fun or anything. So the three mythics that were added were all kind of overrated, and even though medallions were introduced during this chapter, these medallions stinked really bad. The only good one was Machinist that gave you 75-8 or shield, constantly regenerating. And the other two were pretty average. Like you could find Nitro everywhere across the map. So Megalodon's medallion that gave you infinite Nitro was not very helpful. And then of course ammo, once you hit late game, ammo is no problem. So of course, I have no clue what that boss is. Ringmaster Scar. There we go. That's her name. Ringmaster Scar's medallion was just as bad and just as useless as there was just no reason to pick it up. Especially if you were fighting, late game, you would have tons of ammo. Now in the short term, like off rip, me and my buddy would land here and I would give him all my ammo, and I would get the medallion, which was a super, it was a good idea at the time. I had max ammo, he had max ammo, and I had infinite ammo, so it was fun. But like these three medallions, and medallions were a big part of the chapter. So these three medallions really stinking it up was not fun. Now chapter 5 season 2's medallions weren't any better, but thankfully there was enough new guns to carry this season. But in my opinion, this season was legitimately just, hey, let's take everything that kind of worked in the past and throw it into one season. As we only got one new gun, and that was, well, I guess you could say three new guns, with the tow hook cannon and heavy impact sniper rifle, including the boom bolt, being the only additions to the season, which was not fun. Not a lot of people enjoyed using these guns, and let alone this being the only new additions to this already worthless, pathetic season. Now I know I did get very, very what's the word? Hateful towards the end of that. It's just I'm sorry. No one liked this season. Pros were quitting. Content creators wanted to quit. Everyone wanted to quit this season, and the big problem was this was for the first time in my opinion, the community was split. Casual players were crying that competitive players were getting their way and the cars were stupidly strong and they needed a nerf. And if you can't realize that something needs a nerf, you're not a good player. If the only reason you can do good in most lobbies is because you can pick up an overpowered item and dominate, like the Infinity Blade back in Chapter 1 or the mechs back in Chapter 1, there is no reason you should have a say, in my opinion. In my opinion, you need to be competent enough to use the weapons, in the game that's not overpowered to your advantage. We need to stop hating on pro players for getting their way when you realize that pro players spend way more money on this game than you and I do. They also get paid to play this game. You and I don't. Their opinion will always matter more than your and ours. Same thing as an NFL player's opinion will matter more to the NFL than say a random Joe on the street, a random drunk Joe on the street. There we go. And now this was the worst season of all time, and the worst season, yeah, of all time. We can just say that. And I can now exactly tell you why it was so bad. And I think you guys have put these pieces together enough that you can realize why this season was so bad. And that it was very simple. Just like Chapter 1, Season 7 and X, the cars, the fist, the nitro was overpowered. Players don't like it when there's an overpowered item in the game, like the drum gun or the Infinity Blade or the mech. People don't like that. And like Chapter 2, Season 6, even though the mechanics were cool and innovative, they were not done very well. And there was way too many of them. These could have probably been spaced out over a couple seasons, and it would have been much nicer to play. And then Chapter 3, Season. Oh, God, I don't remember. Chapter 3, Season 4. It was just kind of soulless. The character was kind of lost during the season. Like, I get it was supposed to be a Wasteland theme, but it just overall wasn't that great of a season when it came to that theming. And of course, there was no memorable POIs from the season. I mean, the one you can think of mainly is Redline Rig, because Peterbot landed there. That's the only reason people think about Redline Rig, is because Peterbot landed there and it had the best medallion and the best AR in the game at the time. And like chapter 4 season 3, like I just mentioned, the POIs were not memorable. It was an overall really ugly season. Now, with that, we can realize and take one step back to realize what made the season so bad and why the public did not like it. Now, I don't want to sit here, like I said at the beginning, I don't want to rip on Fortnite. As remember, this game is one of the games of all time. It is one of the games. It's up there with Minecraft, Call of Duty, GTA. This game has stood 7 years the test of time. And they don't have to release a new product. Their product is that good that you will come back every season to see what's new without fail. That is Fortnite, and that's Fortnite's winning formula right there. So we can't go hating on one really, really bad season. While we want to, at the end of the day, you're gonna come back next season and play the next chapter or season. I'm sorry, or chapter in this case. I know I sure will. I love this game. Fortnite and Epic Games have done a great job of listening to the player base and the pro scene, because even during the most recent Marvel season, they they nerfed weapons that were obviously overpowered and had big problems with them. Now, I won't say I am a professional in Fortnite. I'm very average at best, but I should not be able to walk into a game of elite rank and dominate for a while. It didn't feel right to just, because I would barely hit elite most seasons and I would just quit. I didn't enjoy playing after elite. But I should not be loading into games of elite and dominating with these overpowered items. And there was a ton of them during this last season. But Fortnite realized from their past mistakes, we need to fix this problem now and listen to what the pros want instead of the casuals. Because the pros want what's best for the game, casuals want what's best for them. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm gonna go ahead and rank them. And since there's apparently no tier list online that includes Wrecked, I'll just say them all now. Chapter 1, Season 7 and X both go in B tier. They're pretty good. Chapter 2, Season 6 goes in A tier. Chapter 3, Season 4 goes in D. Chapter 4, Season 3 goes in A. And of course, to no one's surprise, Chapter 5, Season 3 is so bad. So bad. I'm not gonna put it in F tier. I'm gonna give it a super F. And with that, I do hope you enjoyed listening to this video. And like I said earlier in the video, if you did like it, it would be very grateful if you were to like and subscribe and share this with your friends. So, maybe I can change people's mind about why we should hate on Fortnite seasons and if why we don't take a step back and think about them. Thank you all for watching this far into the video. Until next time, I'm FaZe Goat.